I'm Dave Edminster. I'm the practice director of cybersecurity services at Evotech. That means that I'm responsible for most of, actually all of our cybersecurity delivery around security architecture, security engineering, and AppSec engineering. I've got a background of 30 plus years in infrastructure and technology, with 17 of those being focused in security. And informationally, I have managed email and email security for the majority of my career. I've got 25 plus years working with email solutions, email delivering, email security, such as it is. So Ryan, if you wouldn't mind giving an introduction of yourself real quick here, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Ryan Williams. I am the channel account manager specific to our email security solution at Checkpoint. Came over to Checkpoint through the acquisition of Avanan. So I come from the Avanan side of the house. So eat, sleep, breathe email security for the last 2 years, and it's been a really fun space to play in. So
Excellent. Well,
look,
thanks, Ryan. I
yeah.
appreciate that. Yeah. So for those attending and joining here, this is really an email security discussion. It's going to morph a little bit into the ancillary and connected social connection tools that aren't just email. We're talking about instant messaging, MS Teams, Slack, SMS kind of things, because it dovetails in a sense into a lot of the email concepts as it relates to security. My stance around email, and I'm going to be very plain about it here, is email is a very legacy technology. It's been around, I mean, for a very long time as a fundamental technology. There was no security concept in mind when email was created. It was literally meant to be a means for one server somewhere in the world to send a message to some other server somewhere in the world and have an individual human be able to receive it and read it and reply. As a result, there is no security baked into email in any way, shape, or form as a technology and as a concept. And Ryan, if you have anything to interject on that, I absolutely welcome it.
No, no, it's I would agree. I would agree. The landscape has changed dramatically since those legacy architecture, the legacy gateways were first introduced, and they did their job, for quite a while. But obviously, this whole shift to the cloud has changed the game, and
Absolutely.
kind of required some adjustments and some new approaches.
Right. And I think it's worth noting that every piece of security technology, security architecture, and safety that's come out as it relates to email is an after the fact add on. It's a bolt on feature. It's a new technology. It's something that's been added to try to add security to this inherent technology that had nothing, no security whatsoever. So that's, DMARC, DKIM, SPF, email security gateways, email analysis tools, et cetera. And as a result of that, in part, bad actors have found it very easy to weaponize email and to abuse it. The last I read, it's still roughly 80% of all the email sent on Earth is garbage or malicious. It's either spam or it's malicious content or it's something that's social manipulation. It's bad. So that leaves us with roughly 20% on the best of days that might be legitimate email. And some of that's still a fair amount of garbage. And so the systems have to figure out what's legitimate, what's not, what do I allow, what do I not. 80 to 90% of all the messages that go across the planet today don't ever see human eyes. And that's either because the security technologies in place don't allow it to be delivered to the server, they don't allow it to be delivered to the user. But of those roughly 10%, 15% that do see human eyes, a significant number of them are weaponized in some way, shape, or form. So Ryan, I don't know if you want to talk about some of the common attack types real quick that we still see, but what I think might be more important after that is what's new in the attack landscape as it relates to email.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely evolved. You had your Nigerian print scams. You have your gift card scams still that are pretty frequent. But you still see some of those social engineering scams,
Mm.
where maybe they're not asking you to click on something necessarily just yet, but just maybe interact, and develop it that way as well. So, and then, obviously with the use of AI, maybe the actors may be getting less sophisticated, but the tools they're using are getting more sophisticated.
Yeah.
And so it's a constant, never-ending battle, to where you kind of have to adapt, and protect yourself quickly. Where some of the maybe the newer next gen technologies, maybe more prepared, more apt to be able to secure your email, than previously.
Yeah, and I think it's there's a couple of points that you mentioned there that really got me thinking. One is email security as it exists today is always evolving. So, what are the next generation technologies? What should everybody be keeping in mind? And I think that's something we see as email administrators in our careers is there's a lot of buy a tool, set the tool, leave the tool alone, and let it do its thing, which will work for a while. But there's a point where I would say that some security vendors are doing a better job than others at maintaining relevance and capability in this space. You may have just a fairly legacy email security gateway that's in place that starts to not work as well because the attackers have found new ways to weaponize email and to try to take advantage of it, that those systems aren't as good at stopping, blocking, identifying. And so that may be a point where an organization needs to pivot, needs to consider, do I go to a different solution? Should I be reevaluating? So that's one I think that your comments there made me think of is how frequently do we reevaluate our security solutions around email? And that can be, like we said, an email security gateway type solution. It could also be whatever's coming about that is inherently meant to help secure email as a protocol. And I'm talking about, say, SPF, DKIM, DMARC as fundamental technologies out there and methodologies to help secure email. Are those deployed correctly? Are they deployed at all? We'll see a number of times where we're working in an environment from an email perspective, and there may be no DMARC set up in any way, shape, or form. So those can be areas that are, I don't want to say they're easy because it's not. It takes some work to get SPF, DMARC, and DKIM deployed correctly, but it's very much worth doing because it sets, in my opinion, it sets you up for future success if you get that deployed correctly to begin with. I don't know if you feel similarly or if there's anything more on that, Ryan, that it's worth noting.
Yeah, I think, those kinds of things are important. It's obviously something our solution looks at when making our determination, on whether something's malicious or not. And so, yeah, I think taking all of those things into consideration, right? And I think, you got to take a look at, how much time you're spending, I guess, kind of manually doing these things, whereas and is that time spent that you're configuring these things and working out these things, is it working, right? is
Right.
is it actually stopping the threats that you want it to stop? And so, I think as people kind of see the new landscape, maybe have used the legacy gateways, where they're out in front, changing those MX records,
Mhm.
they're still doing those things to configure it, maintain it, and they're still seeing these malicious emails come through. I think that would be a great time. I know as far as end users go, we put them through training. We hope they don't click on things, and so and we hope that they report them too. So if the end users aren't reporting things, it's sometimes hard to get that visibility. And so, yeah, I think it's a good thing to kind of evaluate your solution, once a year, once every couple of years, because like you already mentioned, Dave, it's ever evolving. The AI is getting better. The threat actors may not be, but the tools are. And so, it almost to are we using good AI to fight the bad AI is
Right.
kind of the way I look at it these days.
Yeah, and I think you touched on two really important ones there. One is the AI concept, because we all know AI, that genie's out of the bottle, and it's being used in a myriad of ways. Not the least of all is for malicious email composition. We've all seen external actors who have composed emails where one of the targeting training methodologies for user bases is, does this read well? Are there words that are like misspelled? Does this not flow in English very well in your language? That may be an indicator of somebody trying to write an email that's malicious. AIs take that out of the picture entirely. It doesn't matter what language I speak. I can ask any number of AI tools, write me an email in Chinese addressing this stuff with these things in it. And I'm probably going to get something that's 98% good, that would actually convince somebody who's a native speaker of Chinese that this is not, I'm not just some moron who doesn't speak English, or sorry, that doesn't speak Chinese, trying to convince them to do something. So we know the reverse is happening here as far as English composed emails by bad actors that are extranational. So that innovation is a big deal. And I like the fact that you touched on using tools and AI as a means to combat AI generated email. And Michael, I sure hope you're able to hear us here, because if you are, I'd love to hear you and Ryan's opinion on this subject.
Yeah, I actually was able to get a device working, so appreciate
Excellent.
that. So yeah, communication these days, it's complicated. So as somebody who's an expert in the industry, we did those audios checks this morning, and then Bluetooth failed us as soon as I had to check those permissions. So sorry about my tardiness here, but AI is absolutely changing the game for all of cybersecurity, and especially when it comes to inbound threats. And so not only are we seeing more innovative attacks coming from these less sophisticated bad actors, but it's now harder for the end user and the average human eyeball to disseminate what is authentic and what is potentially fraudulent. And the irony is that there's a lot of great, fantastic uses and legitimate use cases for these AI tools. And the bad actors are wielding that same technology to create illegitimate, fraudulent use. And so your human brain has a really hard time distinguishing, is this somebody that I actually want to engage with online and over this communication medium or not? And so that's where our detection capabilities and preventative capabilities are extremely important to house inside of all of our organizations.
Yeah. And I think that dovetails really strongly into the narrative of user education for sure, because that's always an important thing, but that these AI generated emails are going to fool a human so much more now because of exactly what you're talking about. It's, the human eye, the human brain doesn't see the failure states that we would with many of the actual malicious emails prior to the advent of AI. Interestingly, and this is a little bit of a micro detail, I found that some of the URLs being generated and domains being generated for attacks now that will, try to squat, like domain squatting and whatnot. Instead of Gmail, it's like Gmail, and coming from that will fool humans. I've seen a few emails, domains generated probably by AI that are using different character types. That A looks like an A to me. It looks, the ASCII value for it, if you get to the ASCII code for it, that's not an A. That's some other A looking character from a different library set, but no human eye can pick that out ever. And if it's not, technology can't solve for that, the human definitely can.
Yeah, the zero font attacks, the font obfuscation, ASCII versus Unicode, there is a lot that these bad actors have been throwing at us for decades now. But when these AI tools really came to popularity, we're just about 18 months into where these AI tools have been really showing up a lot. And what we've seen is just in the last 18 months, the innovations of these bad actors, they've taken their sneakiness and they've taken it to a new degree. And so if it's not, text or link obfuscation, we're seeing QR code phishing a lot, where bad actors have found out that they can get through your cybersecurity layers by sending clean messages. And so if they send a clean text only based email with an arbitrary image attached, no payload, nothing to click on, they're trying to get that multi-factor authentication dupe so that somebody trusts that image and trusts that QR code. So something that we do at Checkpoint is we have OCR based detection. So we're not just conscientious about payloads and attachments and that which we can sandbox, but what is getting sent over and what's the device obfuscation, because a lot of times bad actors are sending these conditional attacks. This attack might be relevant to somebody who opens the email on a mobile device, as opposed from once it goes to a desktop, it might be less innocuous. And so that's where we're seeing a lot of that.
Right. And I think it's great that you mentioned in the mobile device, because everybody's using mobile for all of their work functions as well. We're using BYOD or company issued mobile devices. We're on our own personal devices at home or other places out in the world. So that email isn't just restricted to the corporate ecosystem all the time. It's obviously on our personal devices, which acts as a potential launch gateway. Should they compromise, get me to do it on my phone, that still accounts for a business account takeover or business account compromise that could be used to laterally spread within the business organization. So I think those security tools as gateways to begin with are obviously key. User education is always going to be key. And it's kind of unfortunate that's the case, but the users are being targeted as the weak point, as the actual perimeter. So that training part, I think, comes in really, really strongly. And then the ancillary communication vectors that aren't email. So SMS, we see so much of that now. Then this is not email protection, but it correlates very strongly if they can get an email, or sorry, a phone number. They can text you with it, claim to be whomever, because it's very easy to forge all of this information through DID forging and whatnot through the actual cellular phone system. Again, very little security around that. So if there's not something in place on the mobile device for that and user education, it's very easy for somebody to get smished in that sense. Take action, do something either with their own money or with company money, compromise their own account, etc. So the lateral movement risks here with personal devices are non-trivial.
Yeah, absolutely. So at Checkpoint, we've got a communications-based security approach. We know that email is the heaviest target because every organization has email. Not every organization has a data center to protect or a complex network or cloud storage, but everybody has email. So bad actors, they go to where the opportunity is. But it is also becoming quite ubiquitous for people to have chat tools like Slack and Teams. Everybody has these BYOD, which BYOD is the most terrible thing to happen to cybersecurity. And I don't know if anybody else was working in this time where you'd multi-holster it. You would have phone holsters. Got my work phone, I got my business phone, and my personal phone. We really need to go back to that. We need to make sure that we've got segmentation, because bad actors are taking advantage. If they're not targeting your business accounts, they're targeting your personal accounts, and they know who you work for. They know what activity that you might have access to on that personal device. And so inside of our platforms, we make sure that we've got a collaboration suite bundle, that we're doing email security, anti-phishing, anti-malware for Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint. All end user communications are getting funneled through that preventative security layer. And layers is key and important for the accountability of the tools that you use in your organizations.
I absolutely agree. I think that layering and that approach to defense in depth, which anybody in cybersecurity has been aware of conceptually for a long time, is key around email security and around communications and collaboration tools. I think it's great you mentioned too that like Slack and Teams integrations, because all of that is a collaboration surface that can be and often is used collaboratively between organizations, which means your organizational Slack instance or your Teams instance can be reached by outside actors potentially with very little effort. They can just come from another 365 instance or a Teams instance, send a message to you there, and it pops up. And it's a very new, from a human perception point of view, it's a very new attack surface that users are not used to. Being securely minded around the communications that are coming in on their corporate collaboration and communication tools. So I think that all relates, that defense in depth, like you were saying, Michael, and layered approach there, having security around certainly email, awareness on SMS and on personal devices, BYOD, your corporate communication and collaboration tools. This whole ecosystem is all very related.
Oh, very much so. And it's a fragile system. And unfortunately, with the way that world work today, is that we've got an inundation of data coming at us from all sides, from your personal life, from your professional life. You've got some tools pinging you somewhere. If it's not your watch that's buzzing from a smart notification from some app that your team or your channel uses, it's a lot of attribution to come at an end user. And so there is this complacency with the tools that we use. If it's coming at me through Teams or through Slack, I'm going to click on it because this is somebody who needs something for me to perform my activities, perform my job, and then move on to the next. And so bad actors are also wielding that inundation where we're just adding on to the pile. And unfortunately, bad actors are making sure that their messaging looks like the actual message that they're trying to impersonate. And so somebody in the chat said, hey, I see a lot of UPS scams or FedEx scams or shipping scams, right? We see in retail and manufacturing all the time these fantastically cosmetic clones of what would be a typical notification from a service provider that they use every day. They click on it to track that order, to see what's going on, and then they get compromised. And so where we look out for that, we're looking out for all of the ways that bad actors are doing so. And we're making sure that regardless of the medium of communication, that there's a preventative layer. Like Brian had mentioned, we're utilizing our AI at Checkpoint. We have a Threat Cloud AI platform that correlates all of our data points, and it's feeding to and feeding from itself each moment of every day so that we can get that pre-delivery scanning taking place on all of those communication mediums.
Yeah. And I think that's going to be one of the key differentiators in a lot of the technology solutions out there is what is the AI defensive methodology? And I think in most cases, like Checkpoints here, it's going to be an AI tool of their own that's in some way, shape, or form able to analyze those messages to detect for those AI generated signatures for one, and then all the rest of the methodologies on determining whether this is legitimate, illegitimate, should it be delivered, et cetera, and user training, of course, in that. I think that's, I know we're doubling down on this kind of concept, but I think that's going to be one of the very new and highly weaponized attack methodologies that the bad actors use is the AI generated component. So it's
And
a dead horse here.
I think it is absolutely taking over a lot of not only your professional life but your personal life, right? If the audience is not using AI today, then get on board. I mean, using ChatGPT and alike tools is really fantastic. It's made my life better. But also when people take those types of tools and they obscure their intended uses for illegitimate means, it makes it really hard and it blurs the lines on whether or not, and this is the Terminator concept, is it's like, okay, is this going to take over? So where I have a healthy amount of skepticism about anything that's generated by AI, if it's an indexing tool, if it's telling me that we've got AI generated content, I like to have that healthy amount of skepticism. You need to be able to trust your data sets, but also be conscientious about what are you not seeing from this tool and what is the feedback you are actually getting from humanity here. And I think that one of the hard things with cybersecurity teams today is that it really gets to a point where building your arsenal and making sure that you've got all those tools, it's hard to get there. And then you become complacent because it's like, hey, man, we reached the top of the hill. Do we need to keep going? And unfortunately, each one of us inside of this occupation in cybersecurity, it's an ongoing and perpetual journey. You cannot get comfortable, you cannot get complacent with your arsenal set. And unfortunately, we've all got to deal with the 3 B's of cybersecurity. You've got budget and bureaucracy, which will always come before best practice. And so when these, these buzzwords come up every other year, there's a couple, new phrases. If it's machine learning or AI, you need to, latch onto those concepts, but making sure that the data that you trust is cross correlated with other sources and points of data from your infrastructure.
Yeah, and I think it's great that you mentioned something that Ryan and I were talking about earlier before you were able to join, was exactly that reevaluation of the technology stack you have today. Is it doing the job you need or not? Just setting it and forgetting it and leaving it for years is going to ultimately leave an organization in a lackluster position.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, and one final thing, we've got about 5 minutes left here. There's one question I saw still pending, but I think it's also worth noting and sharing awareness that for years there have been services, basically bad guys as a service, that will compose the email for you, the actual entire front end, the fraudulent end. You can choose Wells Fargo, UPS, FedEx, or what have you. They have pre-generated templates for those to be the landing site. They'll generate the email that comes fraudulently, looking like it's from that sender. Much like John, I think, mentioned in the chat there about the scam UPS packages and whatnot. If you go to those, if you sandbox it and look where it is, it looks like a legitimate landing page for UPS or for FedEx or whomever. Those third-party services, they've got to be using AI as part of their whole process now from an attack perspective. Do you think that's fair to say, Michael?
It's absolutely true. And where there is a perceptional, and I think, when you work in cybersecurity, you get, that peek behind the curtain, you see how things really are. But the common perception of a phishing attack or a scam that's coming in, there's this imagination that there's somebody behind a keyboard that's targeting them. A lot of times that is code that was written 6 months ago, a year ago, and you are part of a bad actor's algorithm and their threat surface. They very much have monetized this so that they structure it like a business. So you've got mercenary bad actors that are sharing fraudulent code, that are utilizing AI to make it better today. And that's where every day when you wake up, there is more phishing and fraud than the day before. And so we have to be really conscientious that the innovations of these AI technologies, while they might, ultimately be to the betterment or demise of humanity, we need to be conscientious that we can wield that to fight for the good. If you recall Tron, we fight for the users, right? But we want to make sure that we are, conscientious about your own experiences. And I always like to ask people, when in your own life have you received an email that has been unsolicited that compels you to spend money. And so from a sales perspective, those of us that have organization components or business units that are sales, it's like, well, that's their job. That's what they do every day. But
Yeah.
from your own personal life, it's like, well, okay, I gotta think about that. Am I a data point in somebody else's cog and wheel and machine? And so when I think about how AI is going to just continue to snowball and get a bigger parts of our lives, I definitely like to not just get philosophical about it, but get technical about it and really evaluate, am I part of the algorithm and I'm creating solutions to solve these problems? And so again, that complacency, I think, is the biggest enemy of cybersecurity.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. We've got one question here with like 2 minutes remaining, so I figure I'll go to that from Greg Sternberg. He asks, with AI making email hard, if not impossible, to identify as fraudulent, what is the next stage when it's impossible to train users as to what a bad email is? And I think we covered some of that here in terms of using AI tools on the solution side to help identify and protect against that. But what other thoughts do you have, Michael, or Ryan, for that matter, on this subject?
You know, it's a little bit of a bummer answer from me, and it's the always be paranoid scenario. Just because you have a clean email from a trusted sender yesterday does not mean that that sender cannot become compromised and is not sending me fraudulent or impersonated scam attacks tomorrow. And so we need to make sure that we train our end users to be conscientious that pay attention to your work, pay attention to where this is. Now, we use tools, we want algorithms in place so that everything that possibly could be thrown at them, that they are shielded from it. And I like to keep them ignorant, but trained to the possibility that something might get through those cybersecurity layers. And so we, of course, want to have an arsenal and a data set to protect them, but train them to be ever diligent. So there's no way for you to be able to look at something and identify if it is fraudulent or clean, because if the bad actor has taken their time and done a good job to, cosmetically impose this, it will look exactly like a clean email will.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that approach is going to be key, and that user education will always be there, and trying to watch for the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, FUD components. If it's trying to get me to do something, how am I being manipulated is the question I think everybody should be asking themselves in those cases. Well, with that said, thank you, Michael. Thank you, Ryan, for being here. We're at time. I really appreciate everybody joining us here for this session. This recording is available here. Feel free to reach out to Evotech or the Checkpoint team with any questions that you might have. We're all here and happy to answer them. Thank you for attending. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Ryan. I hope you all have a great day.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Ryan.
See you guys.